Well, General Petraeus, let me begin by asking you point blank, did the U.S. just lose the war in Afghanistan?
Well, certainly the outcome, I think, is catastrophic. It's also heartbreaking. It's tragic. And I do think there were alternative approaches, options that we, in fact, should have considered. I counseled those for many years. But we are where we are now. And I think what's most important at this moment in time is to realize that there are many that we have so far left behind. And we must do everything we can with all the resources available to us to ensure that we meet the moral obligation to them.
Was there any version of the story that did not end with the Taliban back in charge?
Certainly there was. There was a sustained commitment that could have been pursued. 3,500 troops with a lot of drones and a lot of air power and 8,500 coalition forces, and perhaps most importantly, the contractors still on the ground to keep the Afghan Air Force flying. I think that it was really the psychological effect of our announcement of the withdrawal, then the actual withdrawal, and then very significantly the withdrawal of the contractors that kept the U.S. provided helicopters and planes in the air and showed the Afghan soldiers on the ground that there would be someone coming to the rescue with resupplies, reinforcements, and indeed with close air support. And if soldiers on the ground don't think that that is coming, then they're going to do what we have seen Afghan soldiers do in the past week. And by the way, Afghan soldiers fought and died in huge numbers over the course of the past 2 decades. We were worried, in fact, that they wouldn't be able to replace all those they lost. So the idea that they wouldn't fight for their country is something that I think is just not accurate.
At the same time, you and others had described the potential for a civil war. In fact, this has been, relatively bloodless, and I use the term relatively. The Taliban came into these towns. There are reports that there was money exchange, there were bribes. In the end, was there a lack of understanding of how deep corruption goes in that society and how it could affect the outcome?
Well, there's no question that there has been very, very troubling corruption over the years. We created an anti-corruption task force with the Afghans when I was the commander in Afghanistan. But these are survivors. Afghanistan, the citizens there, the leaders there, when they recognize that, again, we're gone and there's nothing coming to their rescue, they're going to do what people in those circumstances do. And that is they will either flee or they will surrender or cut a deal. And a lot of them clearly did cut deals.
You and I are having this conversation before we hear from the president, but up until now, he has he's said the decision is the decision. There is no regret. From a military perspective, is there any option left for the U.S. to re-engage in a peacekeeping role, or has that opportunity simply gone past?
Well, I don't think in a peacekeeping role. I think what the military should be doing now is employing all of the resources available to ensure that we take care of those who put their lives and their lives of their families in jeopardy by serving alongside us on the battlefield as battlefield interpreters. There's probably 15 to 16,000 more of them, plus family members who qualify for the special immigrant visa. And there's a number of others who, again, worked with, supported us, whose names are on lists for assassination by the Taliban now, as we have seen actually in the outlying cities and valleys of Afghanistan. And we need to do everything we can to see to them right now. Then we can, again, relitigate the past. We can talk about the future. But clearly what's most important right now is those we have so far left behind.
I think we're all, it's fair to say, upset or shocked by some of the images we've seen come out of the airport. Again, from a military perspective, can you describe the danger and the risk of the kind of mission underway right now at the Kabul airport?
It's enormously challenging because everyone is going to swarm that airport. The images have shown that everyone is trying to get on every available flight. And that's why we have to be very, very clear that, again, we will, first of all, not tolerate the Taliban impeding it, but also we're going to have individuals empowered on the ground who are going to have to make very, very difficult decisions about who gets on an aircraft and who does not. That's going to be, again, very, very difficult, but it can't be micromanaged from Washington. Military commanders and diplomats on the ground are going to have to make those decisions, and they're going to have an enormous amount of security to ensure that they can that they can keep the perimeter of that airfield or reestablish it, because my understanding from individuals on the ground is that that perimeter has collapsed.
I don't think any of us who have seen it will forget the image of people literally clinging to the side of a C-17 with the words U.S. Air Force on the side. Can you talk about what the long-term impact will be globally of that image?
Well, I don't think you can argue that that is damaging to our credibility and to our reputation around the world. The question is, what do we do now? Can we retrieve at least something out of this by meeting the moral obligation of the moment to those who have put their lives in jeopardy by serving with us?
When you were commander there, engaged in the fight, what was the long-term goal in your mind? Was there a point where you thought that the U.S. could pull back to the extent that they could have a functioning Afghan government?
There was. In fact, it was during my time that we began the process. We established the process of transition to Afghan forces and Afghan institutions in select locations in the country. And that did continue, I think, in quite an orderly, conditions-based manner over a number of years after that time ending, of course, in 2011. The challenge always was that whether you could fully withdraw, and as we have seen, the results of fully withdrawing can be, again, quite catastrophic.
Can you tell me, what would you say to American soldiers and their families who risked their lives, who sacrificed their lives, who came back wounded from this war? What would you tell them right now as they watch all this play out?
Well, I would tell them what I've told innumerable individuals who have sent me emails and texts and all the rest, and that is that they should be quietly proud that when our country needed them, in the wake of the 9/11 attacks, that they volunteered to step forward and serve our country at a time of war. And I can tell you that I feel enormously privileged to have done that as well, and indeed to have led them in Afghanistan as well as in Iraq.
Will you feel any sense of emptiness when we mark the 20th anniversary of September 11th, based on what we've seen transpire in Afghanistan?
It's a very interesting question, Lester, because I think I feel very differently about the prospect of that anniversary than I did, frankly, before the collapse in Afghanistan.
Are these the Taliban? Are we facing the same Taliban that was running the country up until the U.S. invasion, or have they evolved into something different?
I think they have evolved in the sense that they are more conscious of their public relations campaign, their image around the world. They will try to present that they're an evolved version of the old Taliban. But I think the actions on the ground in the cities and districts and so forth far from Kabul seem to indicate that they are the same old Taliban, that they're an ultra-conservative, medieval, theocratic organization that seeks to establish an Islamist emirate in which I am fairly confident Al-Qaeda and the Islamic State will be able to reestablish sanctuaries, but we will, without question, keep an eye on that, disrupt it, degrade it, and ideally destroy it when that happens. But that's going to be vastly more difficult given the distance from which we'll have to operate. We have no bases in Afghanistan or in the region now, so all of our activities will have to come out of the Gulf states, principally Qatar and the United Arab Emirates.
So you see a military role in Afghanistan, but really more from looking at for our own strategic interests rather than stabilization.
I don't see how we would get involved in stabilization of a country run by the Taliban, Lester. I wonder whether we'll even reestablish an embassy anytime soon. So, no, I don't see a role other than to ensure that we can identify activities by Al-Qaeda and also by the Islamic State affiliate in the Afghanistan-Pakistan region when they try to reestablish the kind of sanctuary that Al-Qaeda had when they planned the 9/11 attacks in Afghanistan under Taliban control.
In general, I'm sure coming up through the officer ranks, the lessons of Vietnam were hammered into your generation of officer. Are we at a point now that we've already forgotten those lessons?
Well, my PhD dissertation, in fact, was on the impact of the lessons of Vietnam on America's military leadership. And certainly, in certain respects, this experience, and obviously our experience in Iraq and elsewhere, will tend to reinforce some of those lessons about caution, about being very, very careful before committing our forces to combat and so forth. That said, the lessons of the past can obfuscate as well as illuminate. And clearly, these lessons may or may not offer enormous insight into what is most important in the world right now, which is, needless to say, the challenges associated with an era of renewed great power rivalries.
I want to ask you about China. China has already signaled that it will likely recognize the Taliban government, whatever government ends up in power there. Should we be concerned about the greater loss of influence in the region that this could bring?
Oh, I think we should be. We should be cognizant of that. But look, we should always expect other countries to do what is in their interests. We should expect Russia to lead the rush to Kabul to recognize the Taliban and work with them, even though, of course, it was the Taliban, in a way, the Mujahideen, which we supported, that ended the Soviet operation in Afghanistan. China has long sought access to the extraordinary mineral wealth of Afghanistan. Indeed, they owned a copper mine south of Kabul, from which they fled when there were rocket and mortar attacks. If there can be secure opportunities for them there, I'm sure that they will seek those opportunities as they have elsewhere around the world.
All right. Well, General Petraeus, thank you so much for spending some time with us. We really appreciate it.
My privilege, Lester. Thank you.